My name is Andrew Brannon, and I am an extension assistant professor at NC State. And I am going to talk to you all today about voluntary ag districts. And I'll go ahead and throw this out there. Who knows what a voluntary ag district is? Okay, most of y'all. How many of y'all in counties have created a layer in your GIS? Okay, so I'd love to get some feedback from y'all. Because it looks like this doesn't need to be as basic as I had planned. And I would say my role has been, I'm part of a team that, the reason I'm here is Dan Matting, who's the GIS person for the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, asked that one of us on this group of folks that work with voluntary ag districts with the counties start to try to address what the challenges are going to be with responding to this new law that we have now that has this requirement. And let me ask this question: how many of y'all have had your GIS layers in for 2 or more years? Okay, so you've already done that. Has anyone done this within the past year in response to the Farm Act? Okay, what county?
Wilson.
Wilson, okay, all right. And with cooperative extension, the role that I play is, I'll say it here in a second, but I basically try to help the extension agents and cooperative extension directors out there that administer this program work with county agents, work with GIS office, work with the implement the program. But if y'all will indulge me, I'll do a little bit of basics and to give you some perspective also about how this has been sort of a moving target and how I think the job that you have of tracking these and keeping these layers current and active can be, at least from my perspective, somewhat of a challenge. So the Voluntary Ag District Program is something that we've had on the books really since the mid-1980s. And there was a resurgence in the early aughts to get the Department of Agriculture to take another look at it and say, well, wait, this is a farmland preservation tool. How can we use this thing that we had on the books? And I don't even know how it got there in the 80s. But let's start trying to use it to maybe plan better around good farmland, try to not just allow development to eat up as much soil as it was people were concerned that it was. And so it's this non-binding program where a landowner just says, I agree not to develop my land for 10 years. It's voluntary. It's a revocable agreement. They sign an agreement with the county, but they don't have to follow it. And I would say, indeed, even I came into this job very recently out of private law practice, and I had worked with these before going into private law practice. And whenever I'd be working on a real estate transaction and I'd come across one of these, I'd sort of be like, it doesn't matter because it doesn't have any teeth. It's not a cloud on title. There's no ramification for violating the agreement. And that's one of the big challenges with this law is that it creates a lot of buzz and a lot of activity. And we're always searching for information from the field on how's it being applied. What good is the layer doing? How is that helping make better planning decisions in the county or better road placement decisions, things like that. But what has happened over the past really the past 15 years, maybe even just the past decade, is the concept of the type of land parcel that can go into this program it keeps getting broader and broader. Once upon a time, the law had it to where the tract had to be a certain type of soil, had to be classified as good quality soil. At one point, that got removed from the statute, and then they had that it had to be tied to the present use value property differential assessment program. Eventually, that got removed from the program. And so it got down to a place that all you really had to be doing on a tract of land was be farming it under the North Carolina General Statutes definition. And it's broad, and that keeps broadening. And just if there was an HEL, a highly erodible land situation on there that the Soil and Water Conservation District Office had certified that it was certified as HEL land, and then the landowner signs the agreement. And what happens? I mean, I'll jump to it. Is that here's where we are, and I just realized coming into this, I should have put a before and after shot. But this was maybe, let's say, and this is not even current. I heard somebody tell me the other day that 3 more counties had signed on. I know Mecklenburg County is drafting their agreement right now. I've seen that come across my email. Hoke maybe, but it's the yellows are the counties that haven't done it. So, and there's 10, so we're at 90%. And where we've gotten is that we're trying to figure out what to, what does this program do? What benefit does it bring? And all of that. I mean, going back a little bit on the basics, what the ordinance does, again, it's voluntary, it's authorized, but unlike present use value, counties don't have to do it. So this is the county deciding, the commissioners deciding to pass this particular ordinance. And a lot of the counties, I was just working on Wilson's actually the other day. I mean, most are done off this draft ordinance that my department, before I got there, created. And a lot of decisions are still left to the counties in terms of how they organize it. But the basic benefits, so to speak, for landowners are if you enroll your land in the district, you get your water and sewer. If water and sewer comes out by your tract, you don't have to pay an assessment. It's abated for however long you're in the program. You have you get road signage. And then, of course, the big thing that's always been the selling point is you get your record proximity notice, and that's why we're here. This is all based on, I think, the concept that of what in law and common law we call coming to the nuisance. And that the theory that if you warn people moving into the proximity of something that we might find is a nuisance, is too loud, smelly, noisy, creates dust, that you can't sue or you can't claim damages because you knew ahead of time. The challenge that I found with that, and I'm still doing my research on it, it is a legal theory, and it has been used in some states. I just can't find law on it in North Carolina, and so we have that backdrop that this is something that's meant to prevent something that could come along, and so I'll get to the nuisance part of it and where we are today. But the other thing is that if the statute also provides that if your tract is in a voluntary ag district, or at least it's signed the agreement, then you're entitled to a public hearing. Anytime Comden Nor is coming along, normally going to be the DOT that needs to run a road or widen an interchange or something. I haven't seen this with the pipeline coming out through Northampton and Halifax counties, but I just haven't seen it yet. But this comes out of Halifax County, and it was one near Weldon, where the DOT came in and they needed to change a road. And so there was a public hearing, and the administrators of the VAD program, they write up their findings. And so it does have some impact. And then speaking with DOT, even though their planning is long range out, there has been some sense of success, if we call it, and getting reconsideration of how plans are made and whatnot. And I was talking to the Pitt County Planning Director the other day, and they're keenly they pay attention to this program. So is having some impact. I think some research needs to be done in terms of interviewing each of the counties that have done this and run into it, and result has been made. So here we are. And where all this came about, I mean, this is one of the big benefits that's sold based on the coming to the nuisance theory. And I'm racing through this because I want y'all to get some feedback from y'all. But the whole big change is going to be one word in this section here. And where this comes from, of course, is the Smithfield, the Murphy-Brown hog nuisance cases that have come out in 2018 that resulted in very high jury awards. The plaintiffs, there's a lot of complaint about the lawyers and all that, and you know, I'm a lawyer. Of finding plaintiffs and suing and not suing the farmer and suing Smithfield because Smithfield is where the bank was. That's where the money. Farmer didn't really have. They had really land and some equipment. And so because Smithfield is an out of town, out of country entity, they were able to get this in federal court in Raleigh. So they're trying this in front of juries that aren't from Duplin County or aren't from Bladen County and aren't going to be like, well, wait a minute, I know these people. You know, they're not bad. And so they get into Raleigh, and I don't know why people didn't say, where your bacon comes from? This is the system that produces bacon. It's not small farms. It's going to be this system here. But juries nonetheless said, no, it's an egregious industrialized system that causes common law nuisance, and we're going to award property owners damage on it. And also, because Smithfield, you knew did this, we're going to apply punitive damages. So these cases are all up on appeal at the Fourth Circuit right now, and I'm eager to see how that's going to go down. But the reaction, it was lightning fast. It happened in the General Assembly, was to pass this law, the Farm Act of 2018, and what the primary purpose of it was to strengthen the right to farm law in North Carolina. And even though, as I just said, we have this theory of coming to the nuisance where, if you know the properties, the operations there, and you go within its orbit, area, you can't sue because you knew ahead of time. Well, we already have that codified in state statute, and it's our right to farm law. And what it means is that you're limited. A plaintiff is limited from suing a farm operation for farming. And it's very broad and vague in the sense of what farming actually is. And even if a farm changes its operation, and I believe that even if a farm went from just having some cattle grazing in a pasture, and they got a farm credit loan and suddenly built 4 chicken houses, that's not considered a change in operation. They're still farming. And so the common question I get is, thank you. The common question I get is people will say, hey, you need to, Farm Credit's going to give us a loan to build these houses, but the neighbor says they're going to sue if we do. And I don't know the answer for what happens there, because there should be protected under the right to farm. But the big change, and it was sort of a grab bag, but they changed one word in the voluntary ag district. They changed a bunch of things in statutes in this Farm Act, but one of those was this Farm Act, and that's where we get the word shall. They crossed out may and said you shall do it. So now all of you are obligated, your counties are obligated to do this. The big challenge, I think, and I'm eager to see how this is playing out, is that the statute itself, they didn't further define what your buffer. Well, they define what your buffer is going to be, but they still use the word poultry, swine, or dairy. And I know in the minds of the drafters that means a poultry operation, with a poultry house, or a swine operation with a lagoon, or a dairy that has manure management problems. But there's a lot of other farms that raise swine, dairy, and poultry too that don't fall into that category that can also be counted as ag districts. And so the question I think for you is, if it's just a regular farm that doesn't have chickens, doesn't have pigs, doesn't have cows, milk cows, or goats, actually, sheep, there's other types of dairies that you've got to judge whether you're going to have a 1,000-foot boundary. But for any other farm, just say a tobacco farm or something that doesn't have that isn't protein oriented, you just have a 600-foot buffer. But then we add in this 1/2 mile from a VAD, and the challenge is, what is a VAD? And this goes back to how the county has drafted the ordinance and how they're implementing it. I would prefer, for y'all's benefit, that the county define a voluntary ag district as one tract or one contiguous set of tracts under a single owner. That makes it very easy for y'all, because you can then say, okay, this PIN number is a VAD, and I'm going to calculate out 600. It's this type of farm. I'm going to calculate out and do it. But where the county says, well, and I don't have a board to do this, we have a qualifying farm in this PIN here, but this tract here is not, and this tract here is also a qualifying farm. So we're going to call this whole thing an ag district. I think it gets harder then to define what the buffer requirement is, because y'all are the ones that are defining geographically, visually what that is. And I may be looking at this too simply, and like I said, I'm sort of trying to get up to speed on it. I'm very sorry I ran out of time. I won't have time to talk about this. This is not zoning. This is something that's completely different from zoning, and we deal with agriculture and zoning in a very different way. But Daniel Madding over at NCDA, he's under the statute, the counties are required to submit information to NCDA. And so he's busy at work going through for the counties that have given data. The white ones are the counties that don't have it, but he's been plotting these based on current information. But like I said, one of the challenges, and the challenge for y'all, is people are coming into the program and they're going out of the program. And the challenge with when they go out of the program is that the lawyer closing the transaction doesn't always write the letter to the county to say, hey, we're coming out of the program, because the statute's pretty specific. There's no liability for not informing the county. So it's kind of like the present use value tax office. You have to sort of audit this as it goes along. And I think he sent me this slide, and I think what he's doing here is saying this is a comparison of what it might look like. And I think those look like they're really huge buffers, but I think that might be Rockingham County. I think it's is it Surrey? Okay, thank you. Stokes and Surrey. Okay, great. So the way I interpret this looks like it's tract by tract, and that's where you might have the buffers going in. But I'm not being a GIS tech, I don't really know how those are calculated, but those look large, but it's sort of an illustration of how that might look. And he sent me this is anybody Harnett County here? This is where Harnett County has done theirs, but you'll notice it's also tract by tract. There's not really evidence I see of this 600 or 1,000 foot or 1/2 mile buffer showing up in that. So that's not, in my mind, that's not really an illustration of what the statute's requiring. It should really be going out, of course, much further. Now, how we're doing it in Orange County, I say we because I was practicing out of Hillsborough, but I looked to double check to make sure to see if there was actually a GIS layer. And though I can't scroll down there is not there's not a VAD layer in GIS, but how Orange County is doing it. And remember the statute. And so I'm sort of throwing this out to y'all that in discussions with your county manager and whoever, you're having discussions about what to do about this program, Orange County's doing this through the Register of Deeds. They don't have this going as a GIS layer. And so and I almost think that it goes more towards what the statute's requiring. The statute says in the land records, and talking about title search, which to me says the deed vault, the online deed vault. It doesn't say, because the GIS, when I was doing real estate, sure, GIS is the first place I'd go, so I could eyeball what parcel I'm looking at, and I'd grab a tax card from there, depending on how well the county has integrated those. But as a title search, it didn't that was not a normal part of a title search. And so the way Orange County has done this is they tag it by the PIN. And so I'll give an example here. This is actually a client that I worked with for years, and they've tagged where now we have a stream easement here. There's a layer for that. But this is the pin I'm searching. And you can't see it, but Orange County, it's really easy to search a tract in their registered deeds by pin. I'll search this tract by pin. Well, in that search, we'll just jump over here, all this stuff's going to show up. And I'm like, well, what is that? Conservation agreement. And I can eyeball it now because I know what it is as agreement, and I look at it, and it's just that voluntary 10-year agreement that's recorded. And this guy right here, which also happens to be a neighboring client, I'm like, what's Snell's doing in there? And what this is it's the, if you go and you search one pin under one tract, and I'm just using Orange County as an example, I don't know of any other counties that are doing this, but the other tract's pin up here, this tract is in the VAD, this tract is not, that one is, but that tract's pin is going to show up in the title search for this piece of property. And again, that's Orange County's version of the proximity warning of how that's done. And so, this raises really more questions than answers as you're trying to figure out how to do it. I mean, just ones that I came out with, I guess what I've just been harping on is, a computerized land record system. Does that mean y'all, or is that the register of deeds? I think it means the register of deeds, but it doesn't mean that what you're not doing is important in putting the layer in there. I think it's great. It's helpful to anybody searching title for sure, because now we're all using GIS anyways to get there. But reasonably calculated to alert someone searching title. Again, I say title is not necessarily a GIS matter, but what's the boundary? What's the jumping off point for your buffer? Is it the tract boundary? Is it a collection of boundary that the county decides? And like I said, I didn't mention this earlier, but these programs, they're passed by the commissioners. They appoint a board of landowners in the county that sit on the board and review applications for people to come in. But it's largely administered by either a district conservationist with soil and water, or a cooperative extension agent, or a director. And where I come in is if it's an agent, extension agent, if it's cooperative extension, they call me and I help work with this. But with Wilson County, and I looked at some others so far this season, I'm advocating that the counties define by tract. I think it's easier your jumping off point first you're going to have to know, well, what kind of farming is going on that tract and do they, again, I think in the General Assembly's mind, it meant that they were a CAFO, a confined animal feeding operation. Well, there's a lot of other types of swine, poultry, and dairy operations that aren't confined. And so at the very least, though, I think defining the tract or defining the ag district tract by tract by tract, and again, if it's several tracts that are under one landowner and the landowner has signed an agreement for that collection of tracts, then that, I think, gives you certainty. So that's my goal, is to try to, because a lot of this, again, we don't really know how this plays out. We don't know if someone came into court and said, well, I'm in an ag district, you can't sue me. And for some reason the Farm Act, the right to farm law didn't apply. Let's take that out of the equation. Whether it even matters that somebody moves in and says, well, no, okay, I was in an ag district, you can't sue me, you knew. I don't know what the result of that's going to be. And so, but of course, I would also add, though, that the statute is not specific that a GIS layer is mandatory. Remember, the statute says land record system. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going on and on, but